So just a reminder, we're going to have outgoing on this side, incoming on this side. If you are an outgoing and incoming, I'll have you sit on the outgoing first, and then we'll do the swap when we de-ratify. Thank you. Just a reminder for all proxies to please come and check in with me at the front. Also, incoming counselors, someone left a notebook at training yesterday. Oh, never mind, it's Daniel's. But yeah, proxies, please check in at the front. Thank you. Okay, everyone, just a reminder, we're going to have outgoing council over on this side and incoming council over on this side. Any proxies, please check in at the front with me. And councilors, make sure you have your placards. Thank you. We have another mystery notebook, if any of the incoming councilors
That's mine too.
forgot. This is your, okay. I was gonna say. Notebook, anyone, incoming councilors? Yeah. Anyone? Is it? I don't know. Take a look. No? Okay, no worries. Okay, last call for getting food and beverages before we get started.
Anywhere.
Just another reminder, if you're a proxy, please check in at the front. Outgoing council on this side, incoming council on this side. If you are both incoming and outgoing, please sit in outgoing first, and then we'll make the switch afterwards. Thank you. Hi. Okay, if everyone wants to take their seats, make sure you have a placard and a clicker. If you are an outgoing counselor, if you are an incoming counselor, just make sure you have your placard. Okay, final call for clickers, placards. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'll hold on to it. Do I get a clicker?
All right, Council, the time is now 11:10, and I am calling this meeting to order. Please stand for the singing of O Canada. We're just gonna have to sing it. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true North, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Now the singing of the Western song. All right, W's up! Western, Western, Western U, college fair and square. Arts and meds are strong for you, deny it if you dare. Here we go now, white and purple colors are run by all who know. Bristol College is the best, come and let us show. Is this you, it's our you, and for her we'll strive to do our best to fight with might and main. What's Maine? We will always adore her, all W-E-S-T-E-R-N, Western, 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 woo! Please stay standing for the land recognition, which will be presented by Councillor Malioko.
Good morning. My name is Adiana Malioko, and I am a settler, a descendant of Europeans living in a country now called Canada precisely because it was occupied for the benefit of future European descendants. It was here at Western that I began to embark on the uncomfortable task of unlearning realities which had, at one point, appeared to be objective truths. These uncomfortable truths informed the way I viewed the world, and more importantly, my place within it. It was my first day in contemporary First Nation issues when I was posed with a question that I will never forget. Who here thinks Indigenous peoples are Canadian? I instinctively and quite passively put my hand up without a second thought. Of course they were Canadian, they lived in Canada. I remember looking around the room and having a sinking feeling in my stomach. I was one of 3 people with their hands up. I could sense from the energy in the room that there was something I was missing. That question, and the conversation which followed, was the first time I ever questioned my own legitimacy as a citizen of the land I call home. I had never had to think about my status as a citizen in Canada. I had always thought to rightfully be one. While I may have learned as a child that Indigenous peoples occupied this land long before my ancestors, I never thought twice about my place in this country. I was born here, and therefore I belonged here. And in many ways, I do believe this. But the problem with belonging is the disproportionate degree to which my belonging grants me privileges which are out of reach to those who have belonged here for centuries before my family immigrated from Italy in the 60s. What now does it mean to be a citizen of a country that has no legal right to be deemed a sovereign nation unless one accepts the doctrine of discovery, which asserts that our colonial occupation of the land is justified because there were no civilized peoples with souls on the land before our great explorers arrived? I had, for many years, seen land as something that could be bought and sold, something that could rightfully belong to some, but not others. As for my family home, my parents had bought it, and so it was ours. It was that simple. But the truth is, I grew up on the land of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mohawk Nation, the Kahnawake peoples, and the Seneca Nation of Indians, a fact which I only knew because of a Google search. Before that class, it had never occurred to me that my active citizenship and proud national identification as the archetypal, kind Canadian was part of the process which kept colonial realities separate from what it means to be Canadian. And so, the beginning of a journey with no end, in which I grapple with my place within Canada's colonial history, began here at Western, which is, by all accounts, complicated and ironic. The very land which I learned about colonialism has been colonized. The very institution which taught me about the devastating impact of the residential school system played a part in them. And so I would like to acknowledge the history of the Indigenous territory in which Western University operates. I would also like to respect the long-standing relationships of the 3 local First Nation groups of this land and place in southwestern Ontario, and all other peoples who would come through or lived on this land, recorded or unrecorded, acknowledged or unacknowledged. The Attawandaron peoples once settled this region alongside the Algonquin and the Haudenosaunee peoples, and used this land as their traditional beaver hunting grounds. The 3 current and long-standing Indigenous groups of this geographic region are the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape. The 3 First Nations communities closest in proximity to Western University are Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. So now that I have acknowledged the history of the Indigenous territory in which Western University operates, what do I do next? What do any of us do next? After all, colonization is not an isolated event, but a process a process which continues when Western University continues to invest in the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric dam in Labrador, which is poisoning the water that Indigenous peoples use for hunting, fishing, and cultural practices with methyl mercury. When Wet'suwet'en people are forcibly removed from their land despite domestic and international law to ensure the uninterrupted expansion of a Trans-Canada pipeline, a pipeline which, as with Muskrat Falls, is funded in part by Western University. When the province cuts funding to incarceration reduction and gender violence programs at the Namarine Friendship Centre, which serves the urban Indigenous population here in London. When Indigenous women are disproportionately reported missing or murdered and can't trust the police to properly investigate. When we stand for O Canada and think nothing of who and what we stand on guard for. Acknowledging something is wrong and doing nothing about it doesn't make it right. It just makes us complicit. Land acknowledgements without a commitment to action are pointless. They must be paired with anti-colonial action. Let me be clear. This isn't about guilt or blame or fault. This is about responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malioko. Please be seated. Okay, we will now carry out the roll call. So all outgoing council, please use your clickers. Incoming council, we're going to be doing it by just shouting out if you're here. Okay, Kaduhara. Thank you. Bachutsky. Al-Shamil. Hindi. Quang. Atala. Ballo. McDonald. Barroso. Adewusi. Lee. Ali. Antazari. Yi. Pahargar. Balananthan. Not here. Kamenetsky. Campbell. Reeser. Cronin. Fakirani. Vijay. Mano. Keenan. Oh, there's proxy. Song. Hunter. Afara. Yep. Carlson. Kozak. McClennan. Morrison. Who? Campbell. Yes. Julia Campbell. It's okay, there's two. Tuddy. Kaketsis. Katsiris. Morris. Tamberg. Fung. Hollenberg. Okay, thank you. Oh, and President Jalawyer and Vice President Dunn. Okay, thank you. Okay, and all of the outgoing councils here. Great. Oh. Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here and spending your Sunday with us. I'm looking forward to a great meeting and a great set of elections as well. Welcome to our incoming councillors. I just want to make a note. We do have the agenda is split into for action for outgoing council, for both councils, and then incoming council. So just while we are focusing on the outgoing council action items, if you would just sit there quietly. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And then as far as the outgoing council is concerned, once you have been de-ratified, I would love if you would stay. But if you have other commitments for whatever reason, of course I understand and you're welcome to leave. I also just wanted to say I really had a great year this year with all of you on Outgoing Council. I think you did a lot of amazing work, and it was really a great year to see all of your growth, and thank you for putting up with me for the past 8 months, and I look forward to all the amazing changes you're going to make in your life going forward. And with that being said, we will move on to the approval of the agenda. I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Vice President Chang, Councillor Rocchese. Okay, any amendments to the agenda at this time? Okay, I do have an amendment. So the motion 5, which is a motion to approve updated policy binder, will be just replaced, the wording entirely by the motion that Keaton posted in the Facebook group yesterday. So the motion that was on the agenda was just essentially a placeholder, and then the wording was in the Facebook group. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Stebbing and Councillor Anthony. Any objections to that amendment? Okay, seeing none, I'll take that as approved. And any objections to the agenda as amended? Seeing none, I'll take that as approved as well. Next, we'll move on to the approval of minutes from our last council meeting, February 27th. I'll look for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Van Galen and President Pratt. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, and any amendments to the minutes at this time? Okay, any objections? Seeing none, I'll take those as approved. Okay, we will now move on to the presentations for this morning. Starting off with the welcoming speech by Mitchell Pratt, the outgoing USC president.
All right. Hello, friends. So my name is Mitchell William Charles Lee Pratt II, after my great-grandfather, but most of you know me as Mitch. So it feels pretty weird to be standing in front of you today, gripping the podium yet again. But after 5 years at Western, this day marks my final meeting as a voting member on council. 3 terms, 27 council meetings, 1 misguided Gazette budgetary crusade, and of course, thousands of in-meeting Facebook messages. It is hard to believe I won't ever get to raise a placard to motion for adjournment ever again. But I do have 1 gray hair to mark each one of the 27 council meetings I had to sit through. Don't worry, incoming council, it's not as bad as it sounds. My first ever involvement on this campus was through council. After being turned down by multiple clubs and the SSC first year position, who I got my revenge on by, of course, becoming their president. Despite my disappointment, those around me encouraged me to run for a council position. And after my first year on council and meeting the fantastic community of passionate leaders, I never looked back. Last year at AGM, Toby said that the USC has the ability to do for students what no other group can. We can create an environment for the best and brightest students to learn, experience, thrive, lead, and ultimately change the world. This year, as USC president, I have seen just that. Some council highlights I wanted to touch on for the year. In September, we hosted the largest university concert in Canada, selling over 11,000 tickets. Redefining what alternative programming can look like, prioritizing safety and giving students a choice to celebrate their Purple Pride, which we're proud to present will be renewed for a second coming year as the first ever large-scale programming that has been renewed for 2 years in a row in terms of this initiative. In October, an ad hoc committee to address mature and transfer students, motioned by your fellow councillors, was brought forward. We endorsed and distributed an inclusivity and accessibility checklist to guide future programming and make programming more accessible for all individuals. We drafted a draft freedom of expression policy, was put forward to council for discussion and approved by council overwhelmingly. In November, we made a motion to address anti-Semitism on campus, which passed unanimously, signaling that the continued commitment by the USC and our student leaders to support minority groups on campus and shows we stand firmly in that hatred and bigotry do not have a place anywhere on our campus or in our society. In January, A motion to support resident staff went forward in their unionization efforts as they tried to find more fair and equitable treatment as fellow student leaders on this campus and an essential front line in providing support services to some of our most vulnerable students. We demonstrated the role that a council can and should play in ensuring that community members, and specifically resident staff, should have adequate access to support, and council can act as their voice in supporting them to make political decisions on this campus. In February, we amended the community standards policy to include discrimination against identifiable groups, including those outlined in the Ontario Human Rights Code, building on the motion to address anti-Semitism on campus. And of course, a presentation on the Brochdale Task Force, the community question requiring a community answer. Students to be treated as equals and peers at the table, because everyone in this room knows that homecoming is not just for alumni, because the students will one day be the alumni as well, and we just need to start to take a focus to invest that time and build that priority with our students to ensure that they feel they are truly purple and proud and feel that connection to the larger Western community. So 6 regularly scheduled meetings throughout this year and a whole lot of impact from this outgoing council. And I want to, for outgoing council, give yourselves a huge round of applause here for all the work you have done this year. To next year's council. Embrace the leadership role you have chosen to take on. And if I had one piece of advice for you, it is simply one single thing. Talk to students. Ask them their thoughts. When you're putting forward a motion, bounce it by 5 of your friends. When entering into the post-student choice environment, it's not going to be Facebook posts or communication campaigns or anything else that saves the USC and its essential services. It is going to be people talking to other people about why the USC makes impact on their lives. And I truly uphold yourselves to that standard and carry that forward to make the extra effort and makes the extra mile, because every single conversation you have with a fellow student can create that impact and can create the change within their world. So thank you. And best of luck to all of you, and make sure to hold Barty accountable. To my executive, last year I stood on this stage, nervous, being crushed under the weight of my own expectations, and slightly hungover, as I was consistently seeking to escape the pressures that I would soon be inheriting. But today, I'm happy to say that I have learned and grown as a leader, beside these 4 remarkable student leaders and friends. In my own highly objective opinion, these are 4 of some of the most strategic, compassionate, and tireless executives that have ever spent 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in those offices. Yes, Karina, I'm looking at you. Karina, where to begin? Though there are at least 50 slides worth of content to say about the work Karina has completed, I'll keep this brief, just like one of her 40-minute council updates. Just to highlight on some of the fundamental impacts Karina has created through this council and through the student body this year, I'm going to highlight just a few of the single pieces she's had. Not to mention the fantastic mentorship and leadership she provided to every single leader within her portfolio, to which she invested so much time and poured her heart and soul into. So consent education campaign during orientation week. The absence of a yes means a no campaign is one of the most consequential things. Consistently, as you walked around orientation week, you saw the buttons on backpacks, on hats, on t-shirts among first years, and to this day, I still see students wearing those buttons. Highlighting the importance of consent education campaigning and highlighting Karina's passion to know that we can find the educational value within each person, and it's only an argument away. Partnership with Inova for the Safe Cities. So Karina, for this past year, has sat on the Safe Cities Committee of London and provided that essential student voice that we all know cuts among the groupthink of the old people of the world. Initiative with Women's Leadership Motion. So Karina herself has spearheaded and taken Councillor Campbell's motion to provide a communications campaign with Michaela and provide that essential leadership to fellow women on this campus to reduce the barriers they face when seeking leadership positions in student government. With the Women in House MP shadowing. This, to me, I think is one of Karina's crowning achievements for sending the multiple dozens of women to Parliament this year to shadow female MPs for an entire day and to truly have them experience what it is like to be a female leader at the highest of levels. The sexual violence education training for council, the dance space renovations, clubs training overhaul, menstrual product pilot project, which had over 20,000 engagements online, truly proving that the USC has the impact, can collect the data, and can advocate to the highest levels of administration to create impact and to create positive change. Attention to detail, of course, and not to mention all the hard work of her peer programs and programs portfolio. Could everyone please give Karina a huge round of applause? Danny, the advocacy boy in blue. All right, the golden boy, the advocacy chosen one. Everything changed when the Ford Nation attacked. Okay, so 2 USA General Assemblies under your belt, and consistently you sat at the front of the room firing off Facebook messages to me, making sure that McMaster and Waterloo didn't strangle each other at the end of the day. But we made it through. The hiring of a new USA executive director. So Danny, hashtag my president, had to inherit not only the executive director role, the board of directors chair, but also leading the organization single-handedly in one of its most tumultuous times in history. And I can say, and well and truly say, that there is no better or more skilled individual fit for that job or that position to take on this enormous responsibility for our campus and for Western students. Pints and Politics, shameless plug next week on Wednesday. I will see you all there. There's free beer and there's free food, okay? Pints and Politics has given a chance for every student at this university to interact with every local politician at every single level and have those conversations to ensure that student voices truly do matter and can make that impact through advocacy. The work at the university level, the teaching quality paper, the preferred first names initiative in which international students and students within the LGBTQ+ community can truly pick what name they want to put forward on their diploma within their classrooms. And this is a very simple moment of comfort in which we can see how the USC has that impact through the advocacy we do on everyday students' lives and to power to change their worlds. The Student Thriving Funding, the Fall Reading Week renewal, International Student Policy paper, review of academics appeals policy, and teaching awards. And of course, the municipal, provincial, and federal advocacy weeks. I'll never forget looking across from you, Danny, as you fell asleep in your Toronto Airbnb after mentally dueling with multiple PC MPPs all day, with your laptop in your hands, emailing and following up with all the data and statistics throughout the day to ensure you drove that one extra point home. So thank you for all your hard work. Danny, for you, we get it. Advocacy works. And I think that you have truly embodied that principle throughout the year to ensure that advocacy is not just a buzzword to be performative on, but to continuously act and to consult with students on a day-to-day basis and meet with the decision makers to truly get that seat at the table. In any regular VB term, Danny would have proven to be an exceptional leader. This year was a relationship-building year within the university with changes to high-level admin, municipally with a new mayor and council, and provincially, of course, after 15 years of a Liberal government, we had some significant impacts brought forward by provincial government. So I can truly and confidently say I would have rather had no one else by my side in navigating these essential changes. Facing the first change of provincial government in 14 years, Danny has worked especially hard to keep our seat at the table, situating the USC as a key voice for students with all parties. Not to mention his and USA's work with the SEI. One highlight, of course, is the decision by the Minister of Transportation and MTCU to mandate transit passes as essential. No one else was doing this work. It was truly Danny and the USC and USA who were advocating to all the highest decision-making levels, meeting, and of course, taking that deep state. And at the end of the day, maybe we truly did infiltrate the dealer and eventually become the supplier. So thank you, Danny. Can we all have a huge round of applause for Danny and his work this year? Andrea, Dr. Dre. All right. So governance. So of course, Andrea, the Secretary Treasurer, who has been on council with me one of my first years, and who, admittedly, kept my ego in check all of second year as I did misstep after misstep and ignorant point after ignorant point. But through the governance revival, emphasizing the need for strong working groups on council, I can truly feel the cultural impact you made and shown that governance is not just words on a piece of paper, but is actual tangible things you can feel impacting this organization and impacting students' lives every day. The Purple Fest financing, of course, and as we call it, University Fire Festival, because for this 2 months timeline of what we had to implement, it truly felt like this as we all consistently sprinted around the offices to try and execute what ultimately could have been a disaster at the end of the day. But thankfully, there was a lack of cheese sandwiches and a solid budget all around. The Campus Trust Governance, and through working with our health plan and the Trustee Governance Board, you have taken the Western Student Voice and truly embodied what it means to lead as a Secretary Treasurer and also be a delegate of this fine organization. And I was truly proud to see you navigate and take all that burden upon your shoulders to work with other schools who may not have had the same perspective as the size of a place of the organization like the USC, but you have made that extra commitment to education. The club's moving to SecTresh, recognizing the need to ensure proper governance support. Of course, leading a team of strong personalities, because after living with him, I can't ever imagine giving Keaton an order. Michaela, so could we have a huge round of applause for Andrew? Michaela, hello, the communications queen, my right-hand woman, and of course, the one who kept me accountable and make sure I didn't say anything stupid throughout the year. After 60 FOCO interviews and post the drama of this year, I looked you by my side and you said, "Did you seriously just say no comment and I plead the fifth?" as you wrote it furiously in front of me on a piece of paper. Consistently, you were always by my side, making sure that I delivered the key messages at the end of the day. And through every level of strategic communications this year, I feel we truly made an impact on reaching the most amount of students possible. And none of that work would have been possible without you. You've embodied the fact that communications is not about posting on Instagram, it's not about making another Facebook post, but it's about truly embodying and leading your portfolio to ensure that all students can see themselves in the USC. And make sure that we are #relatable, and I'm making sure the brand continues to strongly forward, especially in such a tumultuous time in student government. So could we all have a round of applause for the true voice of the USC, Michaela Harrison. So thank you to you all, and thank you to the executive. To next year's executive, which is almost whole, but not quite yet. One simple word. Trust. Trust today, trust tomorrow, trust for 1,000 years. Trust and invest in that time in one another. While you may personally want to strangle each other behind closed doors, please, when you enter into the public realm, you are all united and working towards the common goal as the tip of the spear of the organization. Realistically, you are 21 and 22-year-olds entering into taking charge of a $31 million nonprofit. You are never going to be prepared for that. You have 10% of the skills of what you need, but I truly have faith in each and every one of you that you'll fill that extra 90% in the quickest time possible. And we are here to hold your hands and be by your side through every step of the way, and also to impact and make sure that you can truly feel that you are making an impact upon the student body in your time at the USC. No executive is going to be God's gift to management, but I truly hope that you're the God's gift to this USC, because we certainly need it for into the next year. So thank you, and I really wish you all the best. And I look forward to working with both Kat, Bardia, and the rest of the incoming executive over the coming months. To the SPO candidates today, the student programming officers. Elections are challenging. They push you out of your comfort zone. I myself, and I think anyone who has run a public election, has experienced the trauma of what it feels like to be nitpicked by a room of people and a larger public body. And that is not something that is easy. So first of all, I wanted to thank you for your courage and commitment to put your name forward, to expose yourself to that level of criticism, and also to expose yourself and expose your passion for why you wanted to run for this role. So can we have a huge round of applause for all the members who have put their names forward today? And if I could give you one word of wisdom, win or lose, be true to the underlying passion that motivated you to run in the first place. And please, council, be respectful to these individuals who are putting their names forward today. So next year, and to leave it, I think, with the end and to you all, next year is the most consequential year of USC history. And I don't say that lightly. The reality of Doug Ford's Student Choice Initiative is that we are entering into a time where we are running a referendum on every single student fee for every single service we deliver every single year to every single student. Truly, every single conversation you have as a student leader on this campus, and it cannot just be the 5 individuals who are working full-time, it needs to be all 42 individuals on council, plus the thousands of volunteers that interact with the USC on a day-to-day basis, need to highlight the value and the importance of your student governance on this campus. I spoke to the outgoing council about how this was not an immediate cataclysm for the USC. However, the campus life I got to experience could disappear in the next 10 years if we are not vigilant and dynamic as student leaders. As I stood in front of council as the red-rimmed-eyed prophet of doom, I do apologize for sounding scared, but truly, I felt panicked in that singular month and the month following, and I still feel panicked today. And I want you to all take that sense of urgency and continue it forward. The USC's relevancy to all students matters now more than ever. And realistically, reflecting back on my memories, Western may be my university, but the USC will always be the place I call home. Because truly, most of my positive experiences and the majority of my student experiences had all, whether I know it or not, stem back to services and essential events provided by the University Student Council. My last pieces of advice: trust with healthy criticism for all of those around you. You can never assume you know the best. Hubris is a USC leader's worst enemy. Always make the extra effort to reach out to one more student and one more day. You only have 365 days to make an impact on this campus. Whether you know it or not, people place the positions you are inheriting on a pedestal. Stay honest, stay accountable, invest your time in students. Consistently, the one quote that has kept me going throughout the year is one by Martin Luther King. And if I am aimed to leave next year's leadership with one thing, it is with this: if I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. Thank you to you all for your patience with me, my many, many analogies, my 30-minute rants to your one single question, but also for leaving me with such a memory and such an impact on my life to allow me to grow as a leader, an individual, and as a human being in my time in this role more than ever. So thank you, and I'd like to welcome up your new president, Barty Gelair, to the stage. Thank you again. Don't make me cry. I'm not gonna.
Can we get a huge round of applause for President Pratt?
Wow, well done, Mitch. So, hi everyone, my name is Barty Gelair. I'm the incoming president of the University Student Council, and what a way for me to make my council debut. I'm extremely excited to be here, and I really want to thank you all for allowing me for this opportunity. I'd like to thank outgoing council, first of all, for your commitment to the USC and to the students of Western who we represent. Your efforts contribute to the betterment of the student experience here at Western on our campus, and your work helps make the success of this entire organization possible year after year. The many successes we have seen this year range from Purple Fest to the Ask Her campaign to transit passes being included as an essential service to free menstrual products. The current council and its executive have achieved great strides in standing up for our students and providing meaningful programs and services to undergraduates at Western. However, the outgoing council isn't quite done yet, and the next few hours will entail many important decisions. I thank you all for taking the time to research and reflect upon the topics we're discussing and the candidates we're voting on today. Your help will continue to see the success of the USC, especially given the challenges ahead. Speaking of next year, I want to congratulate all the incoming counselors, whether returning counselors or rookies. Given the provincial government announcements, we collectively face a trying time in the history of student governments, which threatens the very existence of our organization over the future. Coupled with the pressure of living up to the incredible legacy that the USC has, that has only been strengthened by the outgoing council and the executive, your incoming executive and the new USC council have an exciting year ahead. Like many incoming counselors, I'm new to this role and both nervous and excited for the year ahead. As one of my first duties in the role, last weekend I had the amazing opportunity of representing Western at the USA GA. I was one of the USC's 10 delegates, and it was my privilege to be a member of an incredible delegation, which included counselors Ariana, Chris, Inam, associates Keaton and Nico, PVP Mitch and Danny, and incoming members Christiane, Kat, and myself. What amazed me in particular was the complexity of the concerns we discussed and the thoroughness of our recommendations, and the immense respect that each delegate showed for each other and for their diverse thought and opinions. Our ability to empathize with each other and celebrate our diversity only strengthens our organization. This is the rich tradition of the USC, and my intention is to ensure that it continues. As you may know, our executive team has grown over the past few days with the selection of a secretary-treasurer and a communications officer. When I call you up, please come on stage. It is my pleasure to announce the results of our hiring process, and we congratulate Declan Hodgins, who will be the next year's secretary-treasurer. Yeah, he's hard to miss. And Nico Waltenbury as our incoming communications officer. I'd also like to invite Kat up on stage just to round out the 4 that we have so far. Please give her a round of applause. So, having worked as the associate clubs this past year, as well as being a club president and residence council president in the past, Declan's commitment to his peers and his work ethic and positive outlook will ensure the continued success within the USC, and I'm very much looking forward to working with him again in the coming year. Nico has been a staple in the communications portfolio over the course of his undergrad and has a wealth of experience in strategy, communications, and advocacy. His level-headedness and holistic analytical skills will be incredible assets for the USC, and we're extremely happy to have him on board. Thank you guys for taking this leap of faith with us. So, Kat and I have incredible faith for both of you, and and we're happy to publicly welcome you to this team. I'd also like to wish the best of luck to all the SPO candidates and thank each of you for putting your best foot forward and running incredible campaigns over the past couple weeks. Regardless of who is elected, I'm incredibly honored to work with a group of such incredible individuals who I'm sure will make an outstanding team for the coming year. I'd like to end this by thanking the outgoing executive for their dedication to our organization and work over the course of the year. Andrea, you've done incredible things with the SecTreas portfolio, increasing grants awareness, your diligent work with Campus Trust, and taking on the Student Choice Initiative with a special attention to detail. Leading a team of especially qualified individuals, I can say with certainty that Declan is going to have an incredible mentor going into next year. We haven't worked together too much, and have only recently gotten to know each other, but you've impressed me every single time, and I know we'll have you on speed dial next year when Declan somehow messes it up. Karina, your work this year with peer programs and your dedication to supporting every single group of students on campus has set the bar in the stars. Your compassion for others and incredible strategic mind has been shown over your time in the Arts and Humanities Student Council and as the USC SPO. Whoever has the incredible responsibility of succeeding you is in for a heck of a task, and I'm forever grateful for you holding my hand through my first ever community meeting. Thank you so much. Michaela, you redefine the metrics for success in your role as comms officer. Anyone who can keep such a diverse executive aligned to their strategy so effectively is clearly doing something right. Even before your days in comms as a social sci PA, you always inspire me with your open-mindedness and your ability to quickly understand any situation and empathize with so many differing perspectives. Since my election, you've been working hard, keeping me on track most of the time, which is by no means an easy task. Nico, good luck. You are leaving this office in a better position than it was before, and you have made an incredible impact on the comms portfolio, on the USC, and on the Western student population, in this role and in others, and I'm really sad to see you go. Danny, your strategic, forward-looking, and passionate demeanor are the reason you will always be considered one of the greatest advocates that Western's ever seen. You have worked tirelessly through every speed bump, even those speed bumps that are the size of Mount Everest, and your passion will be missed at the USC. But I just want to remind you that associate applications are open until March 13th. So please take a look to make your 4th year a little bit more enjoyable. Mitchell, words can't begin to describe you, but I'm going to try. Your ears get AM and FM, but I guess that's how you were able to connect with students so well. Always listening to their concerns. It's on FM, buddy. You've been an amazing friend to me for the past 4 years, and I'm really honored to be succeeding you. I told you I hope to one day be able to fill your shoes, and you told me to go buy my own, and I hope that I will. But I hope this time next year, I'm able to look back and think about hopefully the successes that I've had, and I'm able to look back the way you were able to look back on your year. Thank you so much for everything you've done and continue to do for me, for the USC, for the students of Western, and just for every single person you've met. Everyone, let's get a round of applause for our outgoing executive. So we finished this academic year and prepare for a new year in an unprecedented time. But let me be clear. Your incoming executive and council will work tirelessly to elevate the student voice and perspective while enhancing the educational experience and quality of life for all undergraduates at Western. Together, we will overcome the challenges we face and ensure, as we always have and always will, that our students have the power to change the world. But let's not forget to challenge our assumptions and, in the wake of widespread changes, to be open-minded and work towards progressive solutions that place students at the heart of what we do. To conclude, please join me in thanking and congratulating the outgoing executive and council and welcoming your new executive and council to the USC. We have a big year ahead, and we can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Thank you to both our outgoing and incoming USC presidents for those wonderful, warm welcome words to our incoming council, and farewells, I suppose, to our outgoing council. We will now move on to have our standing committee presentations from the chairs, starting with the chair of the Advocacy Standing Committee.
Hi, everyone. It's a bit bittersweet up here addressing you in my also final meeting to council. But I wanted to really take this time to appreciate all the hard work that the Advocacy Standing Committee and all its members have put forward this year. I think we've really invigorated and embodied the spirit of Advocacy Standing Committee and accomplished many, many great things. We've passed various policy papers that were written by associates, but also reworked and reviewed a lot of the historical policy papers. We set the priorities for the USC for the municipal election. We made a lot of governance and procedural tweaks to the policy. Thanks to Keaton a lot for helping our committee with those things. One of the big hallmarks of our year was our motion to address anti-Semitism on campus. This was one of the first motions like this for a university in North America, and it was really a big step, and I think we were able to follow that up really successfully by our motion at the next meeting to look at the Human Rights Code of Ontario and to address discrimination in all its forms on campus. And I think that those are two really important motions that came from our committee and from the tireless work of the working groups that were put together to address it, and I'm very proud of all the Advocacy Standing Committee members for making those two motions happen. I also wanted to touch on the great work that we did during our local advocacy week. This was a changeover year with the municipal election, and so for our committee to be the first point of contact for many of these councillors on the new city council was really important in establishing these relationships that are going to carry on for the next 4 years and potentially even longer. And so I think that having these student faces and having our members of our committee be the first face that many of these people will associate with Western was a really impactful initiative, and I'm really glad to have Danny and Mitch and the rest of the executives walk us through how to leave that positive impact, and especially for Danny for actually taking the time to meet with all of our councillors and the councillors for City Hall as well. I think that was a really important function of the Advocacy Standing Committee this year. We also, at the beginning of the year, started a couple long-term projects. The first one, which was really started by Councillor Campbell, but embodied by our committee and then carried out through the executive, was the Women in Leadership motion that gets talked about a lot here because I believe it was really sort of successful, and it really took a concerted effort from a lot of different bodies to pull that together, and I think it was a really important piece of legislation to come out of our standing committee. I also think that one of the long-term projects, and this is one that I'm particularly passionate about, that we're still working on, is a review of Western's investment portfolio and understanding at least the transparency around it and understanding where the student dollars that are in our funds go. And this is one that we, I don't think, have come to satisfactorily close. And so I'd be looking to the new council and the next Advocacy Standing Committee to take up the reins on this, as many of our committee members are leaving, and to continue to forward the strong work that this committee has done in order to get some more transparency, to understand exactly what's going on with Western's investment portfolio. Before I end this, I'd like to say thank you to each and every member of the Advocacy Standing Committee. I think that each of you have put in countless hours, plenty of Thursday evening meetings where we could have been doing so much other stuff, but focusing really on student priorities and student voice, accurately representing your constituents, but also thinking about what's best for Western students in the whole, and going beyond just your community's boundaries in order to work together to put forward some of these amazing changes. And so each and every one of you, I want to say thank you. I also want to give a special thank you to Councillor Lawler for being a vice chair and filling in more than adequately when I've been unable to make it to meetings and whatnot. I think all of the work that you've put in has been really, really impressive, and I really thank you for being the vice chair this year. And I also want to thank Councillors Marginian and also Councillor Tino for their work as our council secretaries. I know with losing Liz this year, a lot of the pieces around where the minutes are, where's the agenda, what goes where, have been a little bit difficult to contend with, so I really appreciate the work that was put in there. I want to just say thank you all as well to the council for this year. The General Assembly has done a lot to support the policies that have come forward from our committee, and I have really enjoyed working with everyone this year. Thank you.
Okay, next we will have the chair from the Student Experience Standing Committee.
Hi, everyone. So Anama and Mitch and Bardia kind of did a good job touching on the emotional stuff, so I won't spend too much time on that. But I just want to say that it was kind of a blessing getting to work with everyone on the Student Experience Committee this year. This was my first year on council, so it was a huge learning curve for me, so thank you to everyone that had patience with me and kind of helped bring our ideas to life. This year on the committee, we took a very collaborative sort of ground-up approach. It was very much, if people had an idea, we tried to make it come to life. Sometimes that happened. Other times it didn't, and that's okay. It's part of the process. So I wanted to highlight some of the things that we were able to do this year. So we developed a kind of formal application and disbursement process for the faculty soft fee subsidy, which is part of the USC budget. So this is the first year that there was a formal process for applying to it, and that SOFs were kind of formally made aware that this fund existed. We kind of in collaboration with the peer programs portfolio were able to kind of endorse and have their accessibility and inclusivity checklists distributed to student leaders across campus. We were able to complete our program reviews, so the Early Outreach Program, Public Arts Commission, and Food Support Services. And we worked on some more long-term things which haven't come to council yet, but are in the works, which are things like making sure that the Spoke and the Wave and other kind of USC operations have halal and kosher meals available, or things like reducing prices for catering through the Wave for USC affiliated groups, especially faculty councils. Obviously, next year's student experience might look a little bit different than this year's. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's up in the air. So I just want to say that I hope the work that we were able to continue can be continued on into next year, and that next year's committee should just try to roll with the punches and do the best that they can, and basically try to ensure that Western and the USC can continue bringing the best student experience possible. So thank you.
And finally, we will have the chair of the Governance and Finance Committee.
Okay, hello everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Vanessa Casey, the current outgoing Health Science President and the Vice Chair of the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. So Charles, our chair, couldn't be here today, so he asked me to read a statement on his behalf. So hi everyone. As this year's chair of the Governance and Finance Standing Committee, I want to close off the year with a thank you to all the members of the committee who worked tirelessly to advance the USC's vision, enhancing the university experience and lives of all Western students. From drafting forward-thinking motions on student health insurance to balancing anonymity and transparency in the SPO election process, our committee played a crucial role of preparing motions to be debated before council. Thank you to Council for granting me the opportunity to lead such an extraordinary group. The enthusiasm that each member brought to the table is truly inspiring, and I wish all of Council the best of luck in their future endeavors. Thank you, Charles.
Can we get one final round of applause for all of the chairs of our standing committees? So as Speaker of Council for incoming councilors, you might not know, I'm the chair of the Agenda and Council Operations Standing Committee, formerly known as the Senior Operations Committee. And Basically, the Agenda and Council Operations Committee's mandate is to approve the council agenda after it has gone through, all the motions have gone through the standing committees, and then they're all formed into agenda, and then send out to council. So that's basically all that we really do throughout the year. And I'd just like to thank the members of my committee for all of the great work that you did this year in approving the agenda and keeping our meetings nice and short, very efficient and effective. So thank you very much. Okay, we will now have a 20-minute presentation on the executive restructuring, followed by a 10-minute Q&A.
Do we have a mic? Like a mic? Oh, can we use that? All right. Let's get it going.
This doesn't change the slides.
Okay.
So just let Madison know. But it's just so you can.
Okay. All right. Hello. So, keeping up the 2-year tradition now of introducing some enormous bylaw changes at AGM. So, moving into the executive restructuring motion. And if you have a question, feel free to stop us at any time as well if you want to answer, but there is a 10-minute Q&A period scheduled for the end of this presentation as well. Okay. So, basically the context of the presentation is just for a broad overview. We're getting into the history, the context of why we're making this decision and why now we're trying to introduce the decision to council. Role clarity based upon each of our roles. The motion itself, the goals and objectives, and of course the Q&A period. So getting into history. So myself being a former history student as well, I have proudly read all president's reports from 1965. It has been a slight obsession and hobby of mine. So I'm the pseudo USC historian, so ask away. Getting right into it, from 1965. So 1965 is the first year that the USC incorporated to become a formal entity upon this campus. So through that system, all the way until 2007, we saw a system in which the president was elected at large and the executive was elected by council. From 2007 to 2012, we saw a consistent turnout of between 3 to 7 presidential candidates and a 30 to 40% voter turnout consistently, with some slight fluctuations in between that range. 2013 is when President Adam Fairnault came in and designated the fact that 30 to 40% voter turnout was not representative democracy. So with that introduction of the slate system, he introduced a 3-person slate rule. The VP internal, which was inherently covering the peer programs, campus issues, and many things that we see reflected in Karina's portfolio. The VP external, which inquired all the municipal and provincial and federal advocacy, and of course the president as well. So that was a 3-person slate system. And then in 2016, 3 years later, President Sophie Halpern introduced another executive restructuring in which she thought the 3-person executive and slate structure was a barrier to entry for campus leaders to formulate a 3-person slate. So essentially what happened was the executive restructuring motion that went forward essentially collapsed 2 of the positions and roles. So the VP internal collapsed with the VP events to create the student programming officer role and portfolio. So essentially, Karina inherited a position that is essentially 1.5 VP roles. Danny, as well, inherited a position that was essentially 1.5 VP roles as the VP Undergraduate Affairs. So he took on all the inter-university advocacy and absorbing that as well into the roles of the VP External. And that turned into the 2-person slate system in which the president and the vice president ran alongside one another. So consistently since 2013, we've seen a turnout of anywhere from 2 to 3 slates. I think 1 year with 3 slates. And we saw a 19 to 27% voter turnout, with the 1 year being at 27, I think being Toby's year as well. So moving into 2019 and into this year's elections, we saw 2 slates with 4 individuals who were highly competent, highly skilled, engaged many different parts of campus, with an overarching existential crisis of our organization occurring through the changes introduced by the provincial government. And we saw a 1% increase in voter turnout from the slate and a half that was last year. In reality. Thank you, Danny. So looking at the statistics and the history of, in the 2013 period, you can see the slate system be implemented at the 30% voter turnout range, and then immediately you can see the tangible difference over the 6 years that the slate system has been brought into place in terms of voter engagement and turnout. So moving into the next slide. All right, so one of the concerns heard that we've been through all of our conversations with outgoing council and incoming council as well, one of the concerns heard is that correlation does not equal causation. Why does the voter turnout percentage really matter at the end of the day? Well, the reality is that I'm not sure how many people can argue me in that the elections are the 2 highest weeks of visibility for the USC on this campus, not only as an educational piece, but many individuals taking a step forward to go, this is my vision for this essential service or this essential organization on campus, and this is how I want to lead the organization for the coming year. So with that, I believe that how can we expect 100% of students to want to opt in to our services and the fees next year when only 24% of students are deeming it necessary to pick the future leadership of the organization? There is a fundamental disconnect that exists with our students, and I don't know where it is coming from. We do not know the ultimate answers. There is no perfect formula for democracy at the end of the day. If anyone has it, please email me. But this is the best route we saw moving forward. So adapting to the change and the willingness to take steps to improve our current model, which prevents many from engaging in the USC. My similar point in my speech, it is not Facebook posts that is going to save the USC at the end of the day, it is people. People going out and making the effort to engage the students on this campus and all their diverse communities. Cool, so moving into the context. So, this year, as I've gone over, we saw a disappointing level of voter turnout. We saw the decline of voter turnout since the slate system was introduced in 2013 over the 6-year trial period that was implemented by Adam Fairnall. The USC's relevancy as an entity upon this campus has been declining, and I think this is something we need to recognize. We need to get away from the hubris of thinking we know best, and that's from the executive, and that stems from the executive's personalities to the top down. And I think that we all need to recognize that we need to be going out and engaging students. So making sure that the USC is one of the most relevant bodies on this campus. And of course, my most passionate point about this is less barriers to entry for campus students, for students who want to step forward because they're passionate and they feel skilled about the role and they want to project their vision for the future of the leadership of this organization. So context as well for the elections period, I think we saw heightened coverage in the Gazette. No publicity is bad publicity, as Michaela says. We saw a student choice initiative as a call to action on this campus. A lot of students were very confused around the changes, and a lot of students were seeking to add their voices. But yet again, we only saw that 1% increase this year. The women's representation motion regarding the barriers to entry. Typically, I always cite 2009 as an example of in which in 2009, under the former single president system, we had a 60% voter turnout, a bus pass referendum, 7 presidential candidates, 3 of whom were women, and Emily Rowe won that year, and she was the second last female president since Sophie Halpert. Increased promotion of elections. So this executive and I think the organization itself, as well coupled with all of your efforts, I think, out here today, really made that extra push and made that extra effort to go out and engage students during election season and educate them of why the USC has value. Cool, so moving into the role clarity. And really what I wanted, a lot of the questions I've been receiving around the motion and the spirit of the motion itself, we need to not put individual things in a vacuum. We need to not look at how individuals are elected versus what they do within their roles themselves and how what their jobs are defined as. All right, so the president, so moving into my role. Basically, I am the accountability metric for council. When I talk about, as part of one of my job responsibilities, I am the face of the USC, but that's not smiling for photos and smiling with students. That is, if shit hits the fan, that's my face on the cover of the Gazette at the end of the day. That is me being accountable for those decisions. So you bear that on your shoulders as a president, and you recognize that you are the publicly accountable representative to individuals. As a point that said, sorry, Barty, I see you're scared there. But basically, when I think of even the Canadian parliamentary system, which is not perfect, who do I yell at the end of the day? I can yell at my local representative, or I can yell at my prime minister. And that seems like a fairly intuitive system for even an individual who may not be politically engaged whatsoever. So the executive team building. My role is inherently to be, as I describe it, it is everything and nothing. I touch every single thing within the organization, although I am executing nothing because the VPs are the ones specifically implementing a lot of the initiatives. And that is my role, to be there to support and to lead that team. Why does Andrea building a budget connect to Danny going to Queen's Park? Connecting those strategic pieces of the puzzle, which the slate system does make harder at the end of the day, because already you do have a bias with one individual when you are entering into the role, in which you looked at that person, you built that trust with them, you built that trust over elections, and many people have raised that point, like, Mitch, you and Danny work so well together. But it does take away, because I'm not going to be God's gift to management when I'm 22 and walking into, I barely even book my own dentist appointments, and I'm taking on the CEO position of a $30 million nonprofit. So the president at the end of the day needs to support his entire team, his or her entire team equally. So engagement and relevance, the president needs to be the one who's going out to be that publicly accountable individual to students. And of course, as I said, gone over the face of the USC, the cover gazette. Lovely. So I'm going to invite Danny up to talk about the vice president. Not yet. Okay, yeah. So changes that impact my role directly. So breaking up the slate system being the most obvious one, I think. So the president would be the one sole individual who is elected at large based upon their mandate and based upon their portfolio. And really think about how the president is truly everything or nothing in the organization. They put forward that broad strategic vision that they want to see from the USC's leadership. You can agree that the USC's brand feels inherently different year to year based upon the executives that are within the roles themselves. And reverting back to the pre-2012 era, in which we saw that consistent. We've seen this 6-year pilot project of the slate system. I truly believe, I don't think it has worked. So why? Reducing the barriers to entry at the end of the day. This is my large priority. If I can come back to campus in 3 years' time and seeing 7 passionate individuals from 7 different communities on campus taking that foot forward to go and educate individuals about the USC and their vision for the USC's leadership, that to me would be a job well done. The relevancy. So of course, moving to the student choice initiative environment, in which we're running a referendum every single year on every single service, on every single fee, as I always say. This is something that needs to be highlighted. I think we really need to analyze whether the people in charge need to recognize that it may not be the people within the system, it could be the system itself that is contributing to the apathy on this campus. And of course, the engagement. At the end of the day, engaging students is going to be the most important thing, and the more people we have out engaging, the more students during our highest traffic and highest relevancy period of the year for the USC is going to be the most important part of this. Okay, so concerns heard. How do we know this will work? I think having that aversion to change is part of it's part of any organization. But one question I've phrased to a lot of people in terms of our roles as student leaders, and with this 1-year turnover where we inherit a lot of the decisions and traditions of our predecessors, we need to keep consistently asking ourselves, are we doing this because it is best for students, or are we doing this because we have always done it this way? Because it is all we know right now. All right, so going down, yeah.
Hello, everyone. So most of you know what I do in my job, given this year. It's put a lot of pressure on me to, and we've had some very candid conversations about what I do on a day-to-day. But I think if you ask counselors from previous terms, counselors at the end of the year would still have no idea what the VP does. So ultimately what I do is advocacy. So I would say I'm one of the least student-facing executives within the organization. I'm the most stakeholder-facing. And so I meet with decision makers, I meet with the vice provosts within the university, I meet with city councilors, the mayor, MPPs, MPs, provincial staff members even. And so, some would argue that advocacy can be switched with lobby. I'm a lobbyist for students. But that's what I do on a day-to-day. The number one thing is that I sell ideas. So this is a huge, huge part of the skill set that's required in my job. And what I do every day is, I sit across from someone who has a vote on city council or in parliament or in the legislature in Toronto, and I tell them why they should listen to me when it comes to a student decision. And I think, they touched on transit earlier, but I sat across from the Minister of Transportation and I said how this was going to impact local transit authorities across the province, how it's going to impact student savings across the province, and then you convince them you convince them to go with the ask that you're asking them to do. So that's inherently my job. And then also currently, when it comes to my accountability structure, so I report to council, and I also vote on council. And then I also currently held accountable by students at large. And then going into the changes. So as Mitch said, breaking up the slate system. And what we're proposing is the VP be elected internally by council. And so there are a number of reasons, and for the same reason that Mitch said reduce barriers to entry, I actually believe that the VP running at large is currently a huge barrier to entry. My first week on the job, I was on national television twice to talk about the provincial election and the climate around post-secondary education in the province of Ontario. And I'm lucky enough that I've had particular elected experiences, but also I've been a research intern at USA before I was president this year. And I've worked in research and policy analysis. And so given that context, I was able to understand, I knew what the three parties were. I knew what they stood for. I knew what students were saying on the ground, and I had an understanding of policy. But the toughest part about my job is that I would say there are certain competencies that I think students and council would very much want from a vice president. In a meeting with a vice provost, they asked me, did you read that 70-page report that was released on tenure stream faculty the other day? When it comes to city council, they ask me if I've seen the 4-year strategic plan of the City of London. Federally, they ask me if I've looked into the work that the Federal Finance Committee is doing related to skills. So these are the sorts of things when it comes to qualified candidates that you want to run for the role who will be very, very deterred from putting their name forward when it comes to an at-large election, when you're scrutinized, and students at large to this day have no idea what I do. It was March Break Open House yesterday. I was sitting at lunch and people asked me what the hell I did. So it's still an issue to this day. When it comes to a more relevant election process, like I said, the VP sells ideas. As a council, think about the reasons why you run to be a counselor in the first place. You run to represent your faculty. You run to represent your affiliate college. And the number one thing, the reason why you get involved is that advocacy piece. You want to be their voice, right? And so when it comes to actually going through an election process, the perfect test for a VP candidate is for them to try to sell you themselves as a candidate, as a VP, right? So it's definitely a more relevant process for what the skills that you want from a VP. Then the third piece, again, is exactly the same thing I said. Council is an advocacy body, but to Inam's presentation earlier, we pass policies, we have a process. When I talk about student employment, you best bet that I'm going to the USC library and I'm looking at our student employment paper before I talk to people in the City of London, before I represent students at USA. And again, to the point of the reason why counselors run. Think about when I do my council updates currently, people ask me, I know Jordan asked me the other day, last council meeting, do you know if buses will be allowed to go across the bridge? And I do know because I've been talking to the government relations person at the city, been talking to LTC. Do you know these changes to OSAP, the technical details? Are current students who are considered independent, are they going to be grandfathered into the OSAP system? These are the questions that you want to take back to students to be able to answer. Great, so some concerns. So let me just, it's hard to see even on my screen, so I'll read them out. So isn't this just going to cause the same problems as the SPO elections? And I would argue no. I would say the roles are fundamentally different. Think about even incoming council. A lot of you are passionate about representing students. You may not know the technical details of all the peer programs portfolios. There's like 24 people that report to Karina, whereas advocacy is largely a reason why you run, and it's something inherently that's just easier to understand as people recognize, just a question of the federal election, what do you think student priorities should be going into the federal election, right? So I think inherently they're different roles, so I would say no. Won't this cause a weird dynamic between the president and the vice president? And I would say that this change actually increases the VP's accountability to students as well as council. Right now, I'm the least accountable executive. I don't care what anybody else says. I can go into a meeting with an MP, given my elected mandate from students, I can say whatever I want. And I think that is actually a risk, not because it's me, but because it could be anybody 5-10 years down the line. So I think that's a huge part of it. And to Mitch's point about a local representative and a a prime minister. Think about the exact same example of you as counselors right now. If they have an issue as a social science student, they should be able to go to a social science counselor to bring it up to the USC or to task for the VP to execute it. I execute advocacy. As much as people say I'm not, an embodiment of advocacy or anything, I execute it. And I get it through the right political processes to do the most for students. Only council insiders will be successful. This is just a popularity contest. I would argue, consider what the VP's role is again, selling you ideas. They should be able to go through this process and convince you the right reasons to vote for them, and inherently it brings advocacy back to council where it should be. And it's, again, being the perfect test for what you should look for in a VP. Next slide. You're taking a vote away from students. This is a concern that's been brought up, and I would argue that most students still feel that they only are voting for one person, one thing, that being the slate currently. And also another concern that we've heard so much is that students feel that their one vote is unfairly tied to two candidates, where they may only be supporting one. An example is when I ran with Mitch, so many people said that they supported me and only me. And so I think that's a great example that we've heard a lot about. So does this mean the VP will not have a vote on council floor? Ultimately, this is a decision that's up to you. And you can make an amendment on the floor. I'm indifferent. I'm out of here. Maybe I'll apply to be an associate, Bardia. But no, definitely not. So that's up to you. Who takes over if the president gets impeached? So based on the bylaws, the VP acts as acting president until council and the board decides how to fill that position. So ultimately, through elected mandate, it would still just be, I would assume, the day-to-day operations until all of you decide how you want to fill that spot, if you want to reopen, whatever it may be. So currently in the bylaws, that's what it is already anyway. So that's from me.
Just before we hear from the student programs officer, that is the end of the allotted time for the presentation, but there are still about 10 more slides. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder to extend. Councillor Watson, for how long would you like to extend? 10 minutes, sure. Look for a seconder for that. Councillor Woodside, any objections to this extension? Okay, great. Go ahead.
Awesome. So this year I've done my best in trying to educate our council in what the student programs officer even does, right? It's a huge portfolio, as you can see from this, and this is the updated one. So this past year there was also clubs. That was a portfolio under my role. And that's why, I get made fun of by certain individuals about 40-minute council presentations. It's because I'm really trying to give you the information necessary in order to hold me accountable. But that's really hard with all of the different things that are constantly being executed in this role. There are 200 clubs in the club system and way too much policy. There is an orientation program that's huge and has so many different bodies involved. There's peer programs, the peer support center. It's a really large role, and it requires somebody in this role to have the skills in order to be able to support those students. What I've spent the majority of my year doing is building a team and fostering an environment in which people grow. I'm happy to say that from the beginning of the year to now, I've seen so much growth in the 24 leaders that are in my portfolio, and I'm really happy about that, but that doesn't just come. It takes a lot of work, and the person in this position needs to have the skills in order to be able to execute that, to be a manager, to be somebody who can foster a learning environment in which people can grow and learn. So peer programs, peer support, orientation, I've gone over it multiple times this year. For anybody who would like more of a breakdown of that, I'd be more than happy to provide that later on. Okay, so the changes as we're proposing them is to a community hiring model. The community hire model, as per was presented, would be up to 3 town halls. So candidates would be able to run similar to the way they do now in terms of having a campaign and a platform and initiatives that they really want to bring to the student body, but they'd be presenting it in the form of community town halls. And these town halls, 3 of them, so we've got one for council, one for associates and coordinators, which work with the SPO on a daily basis and understand the role inside and out, and then one for students at large. The candidates must attend these town halls in order to be eligible to run a SPO. So if they miss their own town hall, no, they can't. They're no longer in the selection process. And what would happen for the selection committee is, so it'd be a committee of about 5 folks. Governance and Finance is bringing forward an amendment in order to say that it's going to be 5. So the incoming president, a board of directors individual, 2 outgoing non-returning counselors, and 1 student at large. And there's some things about that student at large that they have to be. And the committee, or the candidates, will submit the following for the panel. They'll submit an application, a resume, and a proposal. Those individuals who are sitting on the panel would then be attending these town halls, seeing the candidates bringing forward their ideas, their initiatives for the role, what they have to present. They'd be seeing, the panel members would see how the SPO candidates are interacting with students, how they're answering their questions, and then at the end of those town halls, written recommendations or conversations that have been had, suggestions would be written down and given to the panel, and those would be taken into account come the selection of the SPO, which will be taking place with that panel. Okay, so why? First and foremost, I would argue that the student programs officer is the second most student-facing role in our executive. I interact not only with like a variety of students just because my portfolio is large and involves a lot of students on a day-to-day, but also because, like, for example, if you were to go scroll on the USC Facebook page, you would see like the majority of what's on our Facebook page is literally from my portfolio. We're constantly interacting with students because what we execute is student-facing. It's out there, students are interacting with it on a daily basis. So this change actually makes such a community-facing role a community-facing selection process. Additionally, we want to ensure that the success of the student-driven portfolio is something that we're taking into account when we're going through the selection process. We want to ensure that the individual that is in this role has both the skills and the student-facing side that is necessary, needs to be married into what this position needs to be executing. So, some of the concerns that we heard. Where is the accountability? So, first and foremost, and please tell me if otherwise, it's really, really hard to hold this position accountable from the counselor perspective, right? So you elected me, you're supposed to hold me accountable. At the end of every single one of my presentations to counselors, I very rarely, if ever, get questions. And maybe that's because I exhausted you with 40 minutes of talking, fair. But it's really hard to go, Karina, what happened with that one concert, or what's your budget over there doing, or how's this? It's not a position in which that the student body, being the counselors, are capable of holding me accountable. I don't know if any of you feel very ready and able to ask me a specific question about the Peer Support Center, or if you even have the knowledge, the skills, the capacity to do so, and I don't blame you. This position is not necessarily set up that way. Whereas when we bring the VP into what we're proposing, bringing the VP into what would be elected by council, the advocacy of the organization should be parallel to the advocacy that's coming up with the VP. You should be married. That process is inherent. It should exist. Danny's done a wonderful job this year of ensuring counselors are invested and are a part of the advocacy he does, but that should be something that's more inherent. So why not just elect the SPO at large? So considering the role of the SPO, is this appropriate? The new system will provide an education piece to make sure that the panel is fully aware of the role of SPO. One thing that I came into this role and said was, and again, at no fault of counselors, did they really understand the role when they were asking me to explain it during our one-on-one meetings? Was that something that's even possible and reasonable to expect our counselors to be doing for a position this large? And one thing that I came into this role saying was like, where is my accountability? Did the people that elected me really know what was going on in this position? And something that's really necessary and what we'll be ensuring for the panel that will be selecting this SPO is that they will have an understanding through an education piece where they understand what the portfolio is, so that when they're there and making that selection process through the panel, they'll be able to take the feedback from students, having seen the SPO present to the student body, and then they will be able to say, I actually understand this role enough to be able to ask you specific questions about, for example, the Peer Support Center and the operations line. What do you think that should encompass, right? Specific questions where they're actually able to get at ensuring that this individual is to be held accountable for the ideas that they're bringing forward. And then the last one, won't the community have less of a say about what the programs it wants to see are? I actually believe in the opposite. Right now, something that I've been hearing constantly throughout the selection process is my coordinators and associates, who I'm so proud of, wanting to be more engaged. And that is really wonderful to hear. And as folks who work with me every single day and who understand the portfolio, like to the finest detail, I think they should have a say. And even students at large are going, Karina, so how do I get involved in this process? And I say, well, talk to your counselors, right? But that process, and especially for my coordinators and associates, when I tell them to go talk with their counselors, they're like, yes, but when do I get the opportunity to speak about the SPO from my professional capacity as a coordinator and associate? And they don't have the capacity to be doing that right now. I actually believe that this process makes it more community-facing. We'll actually have the opportunity for those students who are asking to be involved, asking to have more of a say, having the opportunity to go forward to the town halls, hear what the SPO is presenting, engage with that student programs officer. The coordinators and associates being able to speak to, what was I consulted? Do you know this about this position? What is your say about this problem I had this year? Actually being able to engage. So I actually believe this would be more community facing. And the community hiring will not be successful. As I just explained, it increases the amount of students who have the capacity to engage with such a community-facing role. And I fundamentally believe that is something that is so necessary for this role. As we move forward into the new student choice initiative landscape, this role has to be marrying a variety of different things. It has to be advocacy focused, it has to be programming focused, it has to be something that is a team leader that understands how to develop teams, it has to be something that's innovative and creative. This position really requires skills. They have to be student facing, they have to understand how to speak with students, and that's why I fundamentally believe that the community hiring model will be more successful in ensuring that the person that comes into this role is prepared to take on those challenges.
Okay, I will go very quickly through the last bit, so we do not have to have another motion to extend. Not quite 40 minutes, Karina, it's okay. Love you. Okay, so overview of the motion. So in the simplest way possible, the motion to restructure the executive, as we all know, as we've gone over, the president would be elected at large, the VP would be elected internally, this both through a community hiring model, and as well as attached to the motion is the club's motion to move under the secretary treasurer. These will involve changes included within the motion in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, changes to Bylaw 1, 2, and 3, the Club's Governance Committee Terms of Reference, Executive Officer's Terms of Reference, Elections Governance Committee Campaign Finance Policy, Executive Officer Accountability and Discipline Policy, Nominating Committee Terms of Reference, and Standing Committee Terms of Reference. So this is a large-scale, holistic, systematic change to the organization. And I'd like to thank our lovely Associate Governance, Keaton Olson, for also complying with a lot of these changes as well and making sure that they were thorough.
Just to note, all of those changes are in the drive and in the motion attached. So if you have any questions about them, if you haven't reviewed them, they're all accessible on that motion. So you can move on to the next slide.
All right. So goals and objectives. So our goal is simple. Not that simple, actually, I take that back. So increasing student apathy towards the USC. Are we comfortable with a voter turnout at 24.1% when we are moving into this post-student choice initiative environment? Are we comfortable knowing there's a barrier to student engagement and a barrier to entry for our student leaders on this campus regarding the highest office that a student can hold as a student leader in the position? The highest offices, sorry. So the objective being simplified, we want to focus on our accountability, ensuring that students recognize the individual that they are holding accountable, and also the locally represented individuals from each of their faculties to truly connect that interface with council. Are we comfortable with council culture where it is today, or do we want to be moving it to make it more effective for the students we represent? The relevancy piece, making sure that every student knows what the USC does, know why it has value, knowing why they should not untick that box on their tuition bill at the end of the day and every summer, which could eventually lead to that constant feedback loop of decreased quality of our services, which could lead to decreased opt-outs, which the loop could continue and continue and continue until students see no value in the USC itself and our organization collapses. Minimize the barriers to entry so we can ensure that every individual on this campus who feels passionate about the student community, feel that they have the skill set, can take a step forward, run for a position, and feel that they don't need to be worrying about fitting that other half of the piece of the puzzle of how do I win this election at the end of the day, not on my own merit, but connecting it to my team itself. And it's about the people. Eventually, it's all about the students, and we are trying to implement this for students at the end of the day, and to ensure that the USC can continue to deliver its essential services for years to come. Cool. Now we're entering into our Q&A period. So thank you very much for sitting through that all, and thank you for the motion to extend as well. Apologies we took up so much time, but we wanted to be thorough in explaining this as well.
Questions? If you have a question, yeah. I'll be the mic runner.
Counselor Juliana Van Galen from Health Studies. Okay, I know that I butchered that, but just let's move on. Do you have any reservations about this motion?
I think my reservations mainly lie in the crisis the organization is going to be facing for the coming years. And I think I'm going to go back to my system comment, in which I don't think the system in place currently works. And I have far more reservations with the current system than I do introducing something new for our students that could eventually lead to impact and change on this campus. I've also had former executives contact me and go, the 3-year cycle, it's come up again. We want to add some change. But I think that we've seen this. This is a system that was in place for decades, from 1965 to 2013 with slight change. And really, we saw the impact of a 30-40% voter turnout. And I do think that there is history and there is historical context for this. So I'm much more comfortable in this system moving forward, I think.
If you asked me months ago, a bit. Today, no, absolutely none.
No. And additionally, wow, okay. And additionally to that, when we're looking at the statistics that Mitch presented earlier, we have on average 8% of students that we simply lost in interacting with the USC when we implemented the slate system. 8% of students that would have otherwise been engaged. So in regards to reservations, I agree with Danny, maybe a couple months ago, perhaps, but this is coming from the most genuine place in that we care so much about this organization and we fundamentally believe that these changes will improve it and our student engagement alongside it.
Jared Foreman, Social Science President. Just a quick question. I'm sure it's somewhere in the drive, but will just the president be a voting member on council next year, or will the VP continue to be a voting member?
And I think currently it would be yes, the VP wouldn't vote, and this is a conversation for council to have if someone wants to put forward an amendment. To me, it doesn't really matter, I would say. Like I think there's some merit in the VP having a vote. Also, on the other hand, like I said, I execute the advocacy, so I don't really think it's pertinent for me to have a vote, really. So I'm indifferent.
Just one other piece to that, may I also say, I think the reason why we're so used to the VP having a vote is because we've all been raised under the slate system in which both the president and the VP have had votes. So we think, you know, well, will they? But why should they? Like, we need to be thinking, like, what does this mean, right? Are we only thinking of it because that's all we know? Or?
Kieran Lawler, Social Science Counselor. I just had a question about the SPO community hiring. Do you have any kind of like details about how kind of like the town halls will be organized? Because I'm just reading through. It says that if a candidate misses a town hall, then they're immediately disqualified. So like, how kind of are we going to ensure that like candidates aren't losing out because they have a conflict or something like that in their dates? And like, how are we going to mandate that everyone can attend?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things to that. So that actually came up from a counselor who was concerned about SPO candidates just being able to blow off community members and not attend. What I will say is during my campaign period, Kieran, I had 67 meetings with counselors that I couldn't miss, right? So, I mean, we're putting that down to what would potentially be 3 to 4 town halls. This is fundamental. If you're running a campaign, you understand what you need to be doing and what the prerequisites are for that. And if that means attending town halls and being able to do that, I completely, I think that's reasonable considering the expectations right now of SPO candidates. And additionally to your piece, logical-minded, I agree with you. In terms of the execution one, that's something that will come down to the CRO and potentially to council about the execution around town halls and what that looks like.
Nam Teja, Huron president. My question is just wondering if you did any research on whether or not the slate system encouraged more individuals from small faculties and affiliates to run because they could maybe piggyback off of someone from social sci or science, because I know a lot of the slates included members from the affiliates, and I'm not sure if there was many members of the affiliates or small faculty individuals running for president prior to the slate system.
Yeah, so let me just think off the top of my head. Mitch says he's a USC historian. I contend that title. So when Matt Halfin ran, he ran with Jen Carter, who is the president at King's, and then Emily Addison, who is the president at Huron. The next year was Sophie. That was not the case. The year after that was Eddie. Was not the case. Pardon? Oh yes, Sophie was. That's right. Sophie was heads off of Huron, and sorry, I was just thinking about the VPs. And then the next year with Eddie, that was not the case, but there was a Huron, someone from Huron who ran on the other slate. But to your point about affiliates and smaller faculties, I would contend that in the past there's been more actually turnout, especially in the internal elections process before the slate system, that had occurred. So Patrick Searle was the VP, my equivalent in, I believe, like 2011. He was on when Andrew Forgione was president, so he was the president at King's. I think the year after, Tony Ayala ran for VP Finance when the other executives, like Secretary Treasurer, were still elected internally, and he was the CFO at King's. And I think if you look throughout history of the USC's history, there's consistently a trend. Dan Moulton was VP, and he, I believe, was president at Huron or an executive at Huron. And also if you, sorry. And when it comes to the internal elections process too, even more recently, even after the slate system, Taryn Skripnik, who was VP Student Events with Sophie, and she ran a second term, she was from Russia. And so she also was through the internal process.
So, and I'm also flipping that question on its head too. Could the slate system be disadvantaging individuals from small faculties? Because if let's say I'm the president of social science and the president of music, not to pick on music, but approaches me and goes, okay, I want to run a slate. And I say, well, realistically, how does this impact my chances of winning if I'm going to invest all this time and this effort and this, and when it's 400 votes at the end of the day? And those 400 votes matter, but also it could disadvantage, I think, individuals from smaller faculties as well, too, when it comes as a barrier to entry to entering into a slate as well. Because at the end of the day, elections are elections. People do want to win those elections, right?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So yeah, I think I'm not really concerned about the new hiring process or anything. I think that's going to be fine. It's more so running specifically for like president with like a broad elected office. I think there's plenty of examples of slates that have included members from small faculties, specifically affiliates. I'm not sure if pre-slate system did members from small faculties and affiliates run for broad elected office. Did you do research on that? I'm just curious.
No. Typically in the, when you see years of anywhere from 3 to 7 presidential candidates coming out, it was the individuals from different places on campus who felt empowered because they felt, okay, I've had a successful year with my faculty. Why my faculty or my affiliate, why can I not take my leadership experience and apply that to the role of the presidency based on how I see the organization functioning? It inherently empowers the individual at the end of the day, I think, who have picked up these experiences, no matter where they're from on campus or what campus community they're from.
But also, yeah, like Adam Fiornall was from an affiliate. I think Emily Addison might have been from an affiliate. So, sorry, not to just be specifically about affiliates, but also smaller programs as well. And I mean, even not at the faculty level, but at the department level, for example, like Stephen Lecce, when he ran for president, he came from IR, which is a very, very small department.
Erin McCauley, outgoing Ivy counselor. So we all were fortunate to experience this lovely presentation that was very long, but what would you say to a student that you only have 1 minute with or one direct sort of access of communication? Because I think the initial response to this would be positions are being taken inward, votes are being taken away from me. So do you foresee some sort of initial backlash where students feel that that's the only impact because they don't understand the complexities of the accountability and the reporting and all of that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I think there's 2 parts to my answer. I think first is the point that people still have no idea what I do. Students still have no idea what the VP does on a day-to-day. Students at large, they think I'm just like, you know, the second in command, which even in the executive officer structure isn't the case. Or they think it's like I'm the co-president when really I'm the advocate / lobbyist. And I think the other component of this is the reason why people elect counselors and faculty presidents, because that is your representative. And I think with the introduction of the slate system, what has happened is that counselors have been more detached from their role to advocate on behalf of their students. I've been a counselor myself, and I felt that I didn't really know on council how I could best represent science students until something really spicy came up. So I think another part of that too is like that process of having a local representative like you do at the municipal, provincial, federal level, and then having the person sort of at the top that you can go to your local representative about. So I think inherently it's giving more importance to the position of USC counselors.
I think we've asked staff for their opinions as well, because there's of the 62 full-time staff in the organization, some of which who have seen 30 of me in these roles as well. Shout out Vicky McCauley, I love you. But I think there's this one period of time in which they point to, which they call the golden years of advocacy. It was a 10-year stretch. Many individuals emerged out of it. David Simmons, Dan Moulton, I think, was in that stage. And it was all through the VP being elected internally and council taking strong stances because they felt a better connection to that advocacy piece as well.
So that's the end of our allotted Q&A time, but I do believe there are still a few questions that counselors would like to ask. So if anyone would like to motion to extend, Councillor Anthony, 5 minutes, okay. I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Barroso, any objections to a 5-minute extension? Okay, great. So continue with the next question.
Hello, Matthew. I'm proxying for Jake Sawyer, outgoing Eng councillor, and I'm kind of piggybacking off that last question here. A lot of us were very involved with the SPO election, and a lot of students came up to us from our respective constituents asking about questions particular to the constituents, and I'm worried that through this SPO election that a lot of these students are going to feel that their voice is lost because all our positions are here to raise the concerns of our own constituents. So I respect the town halls, but I'm just concerned that I'm just worried that some students are going to feel that their voice is lost. So do you have any ways to mitigate this? Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. What I would contend with is the fact that right now our students feel like their voice isn't being heard. And that has been something that, as I mentioned in my presentation, has been overemphasized to me for about 2 months now as the SPO election's been looming, where students in my portfolio, students have said, I don't feel like my voice is being heard in the SPO election because sometimes maybe my counselors are inaccessible to me or I don't know how to access them, but I do know how to go and take part of a process that's asking me to take part in it. For example, like town halls, where students can co-engage. And for those students who are well connected with their counselors and are already going to speak to them, counselors will have a town hall. They'll be able to raise concerns from their constituents or questions that their constituents have been emphasizing. But with the town hall model, it acts as a mitigation itself in and of the structure of what it is, wherein students are actually able to come in, ask questions, get involved in a way that right now they're not. If my counselor, coordinator, associate, mixer was any indication of how much my coordinators and associates genuinely wanted to speak from the perspective of their roles and like be engaged about what the SPO means to them, then I think that shows how much our students genuinely feel like they want more of an involvement in the SPO election. And when I brought this structure to them, because I consulted with them about this process, they were over the moon excited to say that finally, as students, we get to have an opportunity to speak on such a position that's so student-facing.
And to that point too, I think it's especially for incoming counselors too, when the USC is so new to you. On top of that, and Karina's very modest, but she is a manager of like 24 people. All of these different organizations within USC have like their own specific unique communities. I think on top of that too, for an incoming counselor, where they're so new to the USC, having to learn these 24 different portfolios that report to Karina and understanding the unique concerns of students from each of those individual communities, I think is a lot of pressure put on incoming counselors as well.
Frankie, Science President. So my question is about when you talk about increasing voter engagement, do you have any other stats or anything else that points to the fact that voter engagement will go up with this beyond just the historical trends that you talked about?
We looked at best practices from other campuses as well. So if we look at places like McMaster with the McMaster Students Union, typically they actually run in this one president system, and they actually elect all their other candidates. They have a 4-person executive, and they elect the other 3 all through their council. And with the one president system, they've consistently seen anywhere from actually 3 to 8. I think last year there was 8 or 9 individuals running in McMaster Student Union election with a 38% voter turnout, I believe.
2 years ago, they had an election issue with their email system.
Yeah. Right. And so they've consistently seen that deliverables of the system of the one president system. Same with Laurier. Laurier does have a one president system as well, and they actually hire the rest of their executive all through their board. So we've looked at best practices from other campuses, and we'd be happy to provide updates as well, but we have been doing the research, I think, to look to other campuses across Canada to see how their systems are effective in other forms of democracy. Because as I said, there is no perfect formula for democracy at the end of the day and how we engage most students, but we just believe that the system in place currently is not working.
Yeah,
just to follow up with that, do you know what the voter turnout for McMaster and Laurier are for the past? Not just like how many candidates run, but the actual number of people voting?
It's consistently been that 30 to 40% range that they've seen reflected.
Other than 2 years ago when they had the ballot issue where students were getting the ballots, and then this year they also had a bit of a ballot issue too, but it still is higher voter turnout than we have here at Western. And I'd say another example of the slate system not really working is Queens. If you take a look at Queens, usually their slates are either running uncontested. They had a really big issue last year where the slate just dropped out. The only slate that was running this year, the slate was pretty much, well, there's a vote of confidence. So that's another example that we see regarding the slate system.
Okay, that is, again, the end of our extended time, unless there are more questions. 2 more. I don't know if anyone would like to extend for those last 2 questions. Councillor Barroso, and just for those last 2 ones. And seconder, Councillor Baldwin. Okay, we'll have those last 2 questions.
Okay, so my name's Phoenicia. I'm here as a proxy for Princess Marfil, the education representative, and I just wanted to defer my question to the incoming education counselor.
Do any of the outgoing counselors have any objection to that? No? Okay, go ahead.
So I think this is a really great idea. I'm just curious, is the town hall the only opportunity that students have access to the SPO candidate? Just because I'm thinking directly from education, the odds of an education student actually coming to main campus is very low. So unfortunately, I don't foresee students actually coming to that town hall. But I hope that doesn't mean they're not going to be able to ask the SPO candidate questions.
Absolutely. Actually, one thing that I really liked doing last year, Princess and I have a really good relationship because I've been on council with her for a number of years. But one thing that I got to do with her last year and what SPO candidates typically do is in the process of making their campaign and their platform, which is still a part of what the candidates would be doing, they consult with constituencies. So that those consulting happens with associates, happens with coordinators, happens with student at large, happens with VP events of different councils, including our professional schools, education, medicine, and law. So that's actually something that we have been able to do, and that consultation process, that could be something that is bigger, that could be something that is smaller, it could be just the faculty representatives or like the representatives from your council, which I got an opportunity to do last year, or it could be something that is more encompassing, right? And this is what that council kind of gets to decide, and in the execution of it next year, that might be something we want to explore, right? I mean, we have 3 affiliate councils who also are not located on main campus, so that might be something that is worthwhile in looking into and ensuring that we're making this accessible, maybe just outside of this building, we can do something that's more accessible for affiliates as well. But I think that's what you bring up is a really good point because we're invested in ensuring that it is accessible, more so than it is now.
Also dentistry, Ivy, engineering. Shout out professional schools.
I'm Teja Huron, President. Yeah, this is just a follow-up, direct follow-up, essentially, to that question. My concern is that there's no incentive for a SPO candidate to consult with individuals who aren't sort of stakeholder groups of those represented by the hiring panel. So right now, I think a lot of SPO candidates realize that the affiliates have votes on the SPO ballot, and so that gives them the incentive to go out and consult and talk to their VPs and talk to their council members. I am concerned because that incentive is going to be lost with this new SPO hiring model. I'm not sure currently if any secretary-treasurer or comms candidates consult with the affiliates prior to being hired now, and I would be concerned that the SPO candidate would go to that same bucket where they wouldn't see the need to consult with any affiliates or smaller councils as well. Is there something you have in place to rectify this?
Yeah. So one thing that I would say is I'd really like to create a differentiation between the secretary-treasurer and the comms hiring and this community hiring model, which we are proposing. They're fundamentally different. So I'm not sure if secretary-treasurer or comms consult. Perhaps they do, but in regards to the community hiring model, I would disagree. In that, for example, if I was a candidate and I was running for SPO and I didn't consult with Huron, I think that, Anam, you would probably show up to the council town hall or the student at large town hall and say, you didn't ask, your platform does not reflect affiliate students or Huron students specifically at all. Who did you consult with? And you would actually have the opportunity to hold that person accountable in front of a public forum and ensuring that they are actually being held accountable to the fact that they didn't consult with you or your constituents. And the community, like the hiring panel, would be able to hear that, and you would then be able to write as a written recommendation, this student obviously is not prioritizing the needs of affiliate students, and this is why, from the perspective of someone who attends Huron or as the Huron president, I don't think that this candidate is capable of fulfilling this role. So you'd actually have more of an opportunity to be engaging with that student and making sure that everybody is aware of the fact that they didn't do their due diligence in talking with your constituents. Hopefully that answers.
I'll just quickly jump in and echo the sentiments of Karina in terms of the differences between the Secretary-Treasurer and the Student Programs Officer, and particularly I wouldn't have a platform in the sense that I would have initiatives that are like that to achieve. However, I did do consultations, not with like faculties or representatives, but I did consultations that were pertaining to my role. So I think consultations make up an important part of any running. So for me, the consultations that I did was internally with staff. I went to various staffs that I was planning to work with as the Secretary-Treasurer, and to me those were the important stakeholders that could tell me more about my role and what I should build my so-called platform, but it's not really a platform, or how I should approach my role. And I think that the same thing could be said about the Student Programs Officer. They should also be doing consultations like that, but their consultations and their stakeholders that they need to consult with would be affiliates, faculties, and all the general student bodies. So yeah.
Arguably at this moment, actually, there's less accountability for students who don't consult with associates coordinators, with HBK, with any of our students. There's almost less of an accountability because you're only kind of able to talk about that among your constituents, as opposed to this would be a very public format, and you'd actually get to put in the input of this individual obviously does not care about our constituents and didn't consult, and that'd be a part of the selection process.
Okay, great. That is the end of our question and answer period. Thank you, executives, for your presentation. Yeah, if you came late and you don't have your clicker or your placard, you want to grab that now before we get into the 4 action section. Okay, we will now enter. What? Oh, just move it into the 4 action. There we go. Into the 4 action section of our agenda. So just a reminder, the following 4 action items are only for outgoing council to vote on. So our first motion is from the Advocacy Standing Committee, the motion to approve policy on international students at Western. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for this motion, Vice President Chang, and I'll look for a seconder, Councillor Anthony. Vice President Chang, would you like to speak to this motion? Yeah.
Hello. So this paper is a lot of hard work from Kat Dunn, current Associate Vice President. Worked very closely with Western International, the Allyship Network, to do a lot of consultations throughout both semesters from international students about how they believe that the USC can better advocate for them. So Advocacy Standing Committee discussed this and passed pretty smoothly, given that it was based on consultation from international students through various focus groups that Kat completed. So that's it for me.
Councillor Anthony, okay. Any questions on this motion? Okay, any debate on this motion? All right, seeing no debate, we will vote on this motion. And polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1, polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our second motion, the motion to approve policy on formal consultation process, mandatory guidelines. This motion was brought by the Advocacy Standing Committee also. I'll look for a mover, Vice President Chang, and a seconder, Councillor Lawler. Vice President Chang, would you like to speak to this motion?
Great. Again, this is from a lot of hard work throughout the year from my Associate Vice President, Kat Dunn. Pardon? Yes, and Lane from the Allyship Network as well. And so this was, again, based on consultations from the peer programs. So Mitch alluded to it earlier, but when the vice president internal and the vice president external and the VP student events kind of merged 3 exec into 2. The peer programs moved to the student programs officer, yet the VP still does the internal advocacy work. So this was based on consultation about how to better connect those 2, the peer programs from the SPO portfolio, as well as the advocacy work that's happening from the VP. So again, based on consultation, peer programs love it. Kat, Lane did a great job, and that's all.
Okay, Councillor Lawler, would you like to speak to this motion? Okay, thank you. Any questions on this motion? Okay, any debate on this motion? And seeing no debate, we will call to question. Polls are now open. Still just missing one. Maybe someone stepped out. 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed. And the motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our first motion from the Governance and Finance Standing Committee, the motion to restructure the executive. This motion was moved by President Pratt. I will look for a seconder. Councillor Rocchese. President Pratt, would you like to speak to this motion?
I'm going to keep it very brief, just because we did present to you for a half an hour. Also, I wanted to say to council, if they do see it amicable to the point in time, we can break this up into piece by piece and analyze each of these changes, I think, separately, if that were to be amicable to current council. However, also, we do believe that this is a holistic vision presented as well. So I'm going to leave that open to the floor for debate.
Councillor Rocchese, would you like to speak to this motion? Okay. Any questions on this motion? Yes, Councillor Macaulay. Just the microphone.
Councillor Macaulay, IB Councillor. I know it was briefly talked about during the question period about whether the VP should have a vote on council, and I was wondering if that were to change, how logistically that would occur, because I know that there's changes within each of the documents, and I don't think we want to amend a bylaw on the floor. So perhaps that's a question less for Mitch and more for the associate governance.
Hi. So there's a couple parts to this. So because this is a large motion, any amendments, we'll just be recording the amendment and council will be approving it with the understanding that whatever wording we read out will be amended with the spirit. And that's just because logistically we really don't have time. We don't want to waste everybody's times and like amending it and writing it on the board. But it will be in the minutes, record any amendments, and my associate governance, Keaton, will be making those updates, and those will be sent out to the next council meeting.
Just add on to that, there's precedent for this. For example, with the anti-Semitism motion, there wasn't specific wording, but it just said add the definition for anti-Semitism to the community standards policy.
Any other questions on this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter a debate on this motion. Councillor Lawler.
Hey, Kieran Lawler, Social Science Councillor. I'm going to be speaking in favor of the motion. I think I, along with a lot of people on this council, probably had a lot of concerns when we initially saw this motion. But in my opinion, I feel like the executive done a good job addressing kind of like a lot of the concerns that I had. Specifically things about like voter turnout. I kind of thought when they're talking about like how restructuring could like increase voter turnout, I was kind of like, I mean, that sounds more like a cultural rather than a structural issue of the USC. But I think when it comes down to it, for me, we need to, like, obviously the slate system hasn't really been working at like kind of, you know, energizing students on campus to engage with USC. So I think like we can't really be afraid of making big changes like this, because like obviously there's going to be a lot of uncertainty going forward. But I think given the precedent that we have in place with the system that worked for 45 years or however long it was, I think kind of returning to a system like that with proof, like not necessarily proof that it's going to work in the future, but like historic proof showing that it has worked and the organization didn't fall apart or anything like that. There was never any like huge issues between that system, as to my understanding. And I think just like trying to catalyze more engagement in any way, given the future, the uncertain future that we have, just like any kind of like energizing effort to get students more engaged, to get them more aware. Like if we can have more presidential candidates, someone who may not have been as engaged in council before might see someone who they can connect with better, rather than just the slate system where there's only 2 choices or 3 choices. I think like just even with slate system, we saw in Toby's year there was 3 slates and there was a slightly higher voter turnout. So just even that little point can make a difference, I think, to me. And I'm sure like if the incoming council does have some absolutely major issues with it, I think I'm sure like they will take the effort and the time to research changes that might need to be made if there's any like glaring problems that could come up before the next election. So when it comes down to it, I think just, yeah, I'm voting in favor of this motion because I think we just need to do something to engage students and something to energize people on campus.
Councillor Teja.
Inam Teja, Huron President, speaking hesitantly for this motion. I think that this motion really does make a lot of positive changes in terms of the restructuring of a lot of the portfolios. I also think that it really does highlight the importance of the hiring practice for finding which skills are important for which role. That being said, I do have some concerns regarding the ability and importance of consultations with smaller faculties and affiliates. And so I would really like to see maybe the current executive or future executive work with some of the current counselors from smaller faculties and the affiliates to maybe not make amendments to the policies, but more so put into practice some key cultural pieces that will be needed going forward to ensure that these smaller faculties and affiliates do get represented on the floor. And so I would look forward to working on that. I don't think it needs to be a policy amendment. That being said, I am for the motion on the whole, and I think it's a really fantastic change for the future of this organization.
Councillor Macaulay.
Erin Macaulay, Ivy Councillor again. To follow suit with Enam, I will also hesitantly speak in favor of this motion. I have a couple concerns, one of which is more sort of principled standpoint similar to Enam, that I would like to see incoming council, incoming executive really ensure that we're not losing engagement pieces with these executive positions, that they're not being brought into the organization, and that therefore creating larger barriers to entry for both people running in them as well as people engaging with the decision process. And one of which being the sort of implementation of a process, and I don't think that it's appropriate to put this into policy quite yet because it hasn't been fleshed out, but in terms of accountability towards using the feedback from town halls. I think right now there's an idea that this feedback will sort of be handed over to the hiring panel, but then how is that then used? So perhaps it's a report that the hiring panel has to give out to students following hiring to say that here we use this feedback, we considered this, but this ultimately was our decision, as opposed to taking that information into a closed door room and just not using it. So again, I pose that to the incoming executive to flesh out what that would look like and to create a positive solution for it. The second issue that I bring up that I think is more of sort of a governance issue is the VP having a vote. Not to take away the vote from the VP, but I just think from a governance standpoint, it makes less sense for them to have a vote when they're being held accountable by council, so they shouldn't be necessarily voting alongside council, especially if a lot of the intention behind this is that council will sort of be tasking them to execute on things, so they should have less of an opinion on those issues and more of a response to them. And also historically, the SPO never had a vote and they were elected by council. So I think following suit with that, it just sort of makes sense that their vote would be taken away. So I'd like to propose that as an amendment to be completed by the Associate Governance.
Okay, I'll look for a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Stebbing. Okay, any questions on that amendment? Okay, any debate on that amendment? Vice President Chang.
I'll speak in favor of it. I get it. And as the person who's in the role right now, sure, great.
Okay, any other debate on that amendment? President Pratt?
Just a point of information, could we read the amendment back to council so we're sure what we're voting on?
Sure. I believe it was just essentially tasking the associate governance to input that the VP would not have a vote on council, correct? Yes? Yeah? Okay.
Just point of information.
Yeah.
I would ask that someone also motion as an amendment to the amendment to have the vice president have all the rights and privileges of the other executives, since they do share some special privileges over other resource members in the standing orders and other places.
I'll look for a mover for that, Councillor Anthony, and a seconder, Councillor Stebbing. Any questions on that amendment to the amendment? Any debate on that amendment to the amendment? Okay, any objections to that amendment to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, I'll take it as unanimously approved. We will go back to debate the amendment as amended. Yeah.
Just a point of information, this wouldn't impact the incoming vice president, right? Seeing as she was elected by students at large. Correct? For 20, when they're elected by council, okay. As long as it is noted in the minutes and when the associate governance does these changes.
Okay, any further debate on the amendment as amended? Okay, any objections to the amendment as amended? Okay, seeing none, I'll take it as unanimously approved. We will return to debating the motion as amended, starting with President Pratt.
Hi. You've heard from me a lot, speaking heavily in favor of this motion. But I think I also want to touch on the piece of one of the fundamental strengths, but one of the fundamental weaknesses of this organization as well, in that we successively have a one-year turnover in our organization every single year. This means we are consistently relevant to students on this campus, but that means we're also consistently onboarding new individuals who are just inherently figuring out the roles with differing skill sets, with differing understandings of the organization, which is a risk. But I think that's one of the fundamental attributes of what makes a student government work, is that one-year turnover. And consistently on a lot of other campuses, you see individuals rerunning or rerunning for executive positions, and that has never been the case in the USC, I think, in its culture. I've heard a lot of points about culture, but I do think that in an organization where there's a one-year turnover, that culture does stem from the structure that is currently in place. I do think that whether you know it or not, it is that tangible impact where you feel the cultural difference stemming forward from the governance as well. And I'm hoping that this motion can positively impact that culture at the end of the day and make council more engaged with students, feeling that greater tie with advocacy, and also having more presidential candidates running to engage the most amount of students possible during election season. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Al-Shamil.
Zain Al-Shamil, Kin Councillor. I'd like to defer my speaking rights to incoming Social Sci Councillor Liam Cronin.
Okay, are there any objections from the outgoing council of this deferral? Okay.
On my way.
Thank you so much. Okay, my name is Liam Cronin. I am an incoming social science counselor. I'm not sure if I have to say speaking for or against since I can't vote, but I'll say I'm lightly speaking for. Something I wanted to talk about that I don't think has been addressed adequately is how this motion is going to be framed by the USC and to the student body as a whole. There was one piece of the presentation that I kind of fundamentally disagreed with, and it was the idea that all press is good press for the USC. I think the faith and respect that student body has for the USC is going to be massive going into next year. If we're going to have high engagement, that means we need to have this student body who trusts our ability to govern and our credibility and responsibility to the student body at large. So before coming to this meeting today, I've talked to a number of constituents between 5 and 6 about this motion, and in every single case, the response has been overwhelmingly negative. That needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be treated in the passing of this motion, because I believe personally that the response to the passing of this motion is not going to be positive for the student body as at whole. People don't like change to the status quo, and I feel in a lot of cases, as it is a 4-year program for many people, our student body's memory as a whole isn't long enough to consider this a return to the status quo and an end of an experiment, and instead it could result in a loss of faith if the USC as a whole doesn't maintain a strong, unified message. This is a message to incoming USC, outgoing USC. It's important that we talk to our student body as a whole, that we are accountable to them, and that we present a message that is clear for why this is happening, so people stay engaged and go into next year trusting us. Because this is going to be the hardest year for the USC in at least recent memory, maybe ever. We need to have that initial faith and trust for this to be successful and for the intended goals of this motion to be carried out. Thank you.
President Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also thank you, Councillor Cronin, for his comments, and I echo his concerns as well, too, because through my conversations with a lot of students, and I think many individuals on this council were inherently hesitant about the size and magnitude of this motion itself before the executive had chances to sit down with each individual person and kind of explain our rationale and our belief in this system. And I think that given the time frame of the kind of closing governance schedule gap that we were facing after post-elections and trying to get this such a large motion formulated and put in place for AGM, I regret the fact that we didn't have enough time to do consultation among the student body itself. But I think that this is something fundamental that council needs to address, and that in my message to the new council, and I think in my speech, it was that one simple piece of advice: just talk to students. I think that's the simplest thing we can do in our roles as well. I think that looking at this, and I think our executive is going to be announcing, if this were to be successful, if this motion were to be successful, we would also be announcing similar themes and concerns that we've explained to you today through that presentation, through the form of a public letter that could be published by the Gazette. And so we will be undertaking that initiative to message that to the student body, if this motion were to be successful, to kind of hear it directly from us and directly from our personal perspectives in the role to the student body, to add that personalized touch to it, as well as moving into next year, massive opportunities for education for our student body as well, for educating about the new system. This will also be a piece for engagement for our students. If they're not understanding, perfect. Ask us questions. Go out and engage students. Bring the USC to the students. Don't have them come to the USC at the end of the day. Go out and educate them of why you think this is important as a counselor and why you truly made the decision as a leader and as a representative for your students to vote in favor of said motion. And I would also like, if possible, to defer my speaking rights to Michaela Harrison, the Communications Officer.
Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so I'll just clarify one thing and then I'll add a piece about communicating this to the general student body. I'm just going to stand because I'm short and no one can see me. So, part one, all press is good press. This is the context of elections, and we're talking about students being aware of an election happening on our campus. And I would very strongly make the argument that coverage in the Gazette, whether good or bad, of elections is important. And that's why the sentiment came from all press is good press, because awareness is important and it's essential that students know what is happening on our campus, especially during the time of elections. That's my first piece. The second piece is communications is a multifaceted approach, and this is something we've already considered. We'll definitely be rolling out a communications plan to communicate this to students, one of which, as Mitch said, will be a letter to the editor explaining this. But beyond that, I would ask each and every one of you as counselors to communicate this to your peers in whatever form this looks like. So whether or not you want the presentation that we prepared to present to your council, we can do that. We can have these conversations and I welcome them. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Councillor Macaulay.
Erin Macaulay, Ivy Councillor, again. To sort of piggyback on that question, I was wondering if consideration was given to whether this is the appropriate year to make this change, because I think that ultimately there are positive alignments within the organization where it will improve these positions. However, again, I'm afraid of that initial backlash, which was just brought up by the incoming councillor. And so with that initial backlash and the implementation of the new opt-out, why is this year more appropriate than waiting until next year?
President Pratt.
So I'm going to stand for this one just briefly. I don't like this room format. It's driving me nuts. I'm used to seeing all your faces as you type away on Facebook Messenger.
basically, I think this is a chance to look at students and educate them on the fact that this was a decision for them. This is us as an organization being dynamic and answering to the most historical consequence and circumstance we have ever faced in our 60-odd years as an organization and as a student representative body. I think this is us as a council signaling our intent to students that we are dynamic, we can change the systems in place because we want to work for you. We want to make something that is better for you at the end of the day. And I think that responsibility is on us as an executive, but also on us as an outgoing council to be messaging that to students, that this was a decision for our student body as well.
Vice President Chang.
If I can just speak to the VP perspective too, I think now more than ever, it's so important, no offense to anybody who wants to run for president, but from the VP role anyway, that council can, have the time and the due diligence to really ensure that someone who understands the political landscape that we're entering and your representative at Queen's Park knows what they're talking about, because it's a really fascinating, sort of scary time for post-secondary. So I'd say it is really time sensitive. Just from the view of my position.
Okay, President Pratt, you actually have spoken twice already. I would still need a councillor to defer their speaking rights to you, Councillor Rocchese. President Pratt, go ahead and for your speaking.
I would like to defer my speaking rights to Andrew Bujan, the Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you. So just quickly to answer your question, you said that there's a concern that if we make this change, there's the backlash, and then there's the student choice initiative that's coming up. Well, unfortunately, we know this government is here for the next few years. So we know the student choice initiative is likely here to stay. So I think that if we were to make this change anytime in the next few years, it would be the same result. So why not make it, if we're going to make it at all, earlier on so that we have time to see some of the more engagement impacts, at least the positive benefits for a longer period of time during this. That's all.
Okay, Councillor O'Connor.
Hi, everyone. Can I sit here? Okay, great. Thank you. Jordan O'Connor, Social Science Counselor. Speaking in favor of this motion, just a small part of this that I was kind of talked a little bit about with Karina. This year I sat on the LGBTQ student issue subcommittee, and that group was really eye-opening for me. And just as as a current counselor, I kind of realized that I didn't really always know how to properly advocate with the VP role because we didn't interact with it a lot. And I think that having this role in a time period like this where the VP role is going to be so focused on what's going on in Queen's Park and what's going on outside of school, as counselors, being able to hold the vice president accountable to our students, particularly our marginalized communities, is so important. And the SPO's role in representing marginalized communities isn't going to change that much because our peer programs are super amazing and they're going to continue to advocate for those students. But from an advocacy perspective, having this more accountability and being able to hold our vice president accountable and saying you need to be focusing on students at Western in our communities, especially those who face marginalization on this campus, I think is super important. And that's why I'm in favor of this motion.
At this time, I will look for anyone who would like to speak against this motion. Otherwise, we will call to question on it. Okay, seeing none, we will call to question on this motion. Okay, polls are open. Okay, 3, 2, 1, polls are closed. And the motion passes. Not unanimously, but it does pass. Okay, moving on to motion 4. The motion to amend the club's governance committee terms of reference. So this motion was brought through the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. It was moved by Councillor Ma, and I will look for a seconder for this motion. Councillor Baldwin. Hopefully you all saw that I posted a link to the Google Drive. The original link in the agenda was closed, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. Councillor Ma, would you like to speak to this motion? You're not here. Keaton, just because I know you've worked on this, would you like to speak? or the SPO? Yeah.
Hey, Council, I brought this forward actually during the January Council meeting. The point of this is that the Club's Governance Committee oversees the policy and governance of our club system, which contains about 1/3 of our campus community. And what we really want to do is increase transparency of the students who are on that committee. So all that this is essentially doing, and Keaton, feel free to add about the specific changes you added, was essentially to make sure that the students that sit on that committee are voted, so that when they're making decisions, when they're voting on ratification, de-ratification, sanctions for our club system, they derive that legitimacy from you, the counselor. So it would be similar to the USA delegates who are elected, and these students would be elected by our council.
So basically, this motion does a lot to just update the wording of the club's governance committee terms of reference. It also just adds things like committee members can now send a proxy, or it also moves some of the responsibilities for the vice chair of the CGC to the chair, because before it didn't really make any sense that they had that role overlap. So just internal stuff like that. The biggest thing is, like Karina said, that now these people who sit on the CGC would be elected by council and not hired internally.
Councillor Baldwin, would you like to speak to this motion? No? Okay. Any questions on this motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll enter debate on this motion. And seeing no debate, we will call to question on this motion. Polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1, polls are closed. And the motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our next motion, the governance manual motion. I'll look for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Macaulay, and a seconder, Councillor Rocchese. Councillor Macaulay, would you like to speak to this motion? Sure, Secretary Treasurer.
Andrea Bajan, Secretary Treasurer. I just quickly wanted to explain why, first of all, it's in documents and not like a booklet like was presented last year, and second of all, why we had to have it updated, and that's because the executive restructuring is a huge motion that basically changes a lot of our bylaws and all of that. So if we would pass this governance manual, it would already kind of be not applicable, especially because we passed the last motion and we weren't sure how that was going to go. So now it's just resolved that we're going to pass the governance manual that was attached with any changes that were just made at this AGM. So just to clarify.
Councillor Rocchese, you're good? Okay. Any questions on this motion? Councillor Tasia?
Teja Huron, President. This is sort of just a logistics question. I remember last year there was some confusion about the motions that were passed at AGM not making it into the policy manuals. Has that loophole been addressed with this current motion?
But that loophole has been addressed this year. Second BIFR clause works to make it so that anything that we pass at this AGM is included in the manual without running into the big governance mess up that we had last year.
Any other questions on this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter debate on this motion. And seeing no debate, we will call to question. Okay, polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, President Pratt. can we just ratify the incoming council first? And then it is lunch. Okay, we come to our final for action item under the outgoing council only. I'll look for a mover and a seconder to ratify the incoming council. Vice President Chang, President Pratt. Any objections to ratifying the incoming council? You can't object? No, there are no, you cannot object. This is happening. Okay, seeing none, the motion is approved. Congratulations, incoming council. You are now ratified. And on that note, recess is baked into this agenda, and we will now have lunch for 45 minutes, just because I want to keep it going.
Lunch.